For as long as I could remember, I dreamed of retirement as a quiet surrender to peace. After 37 years of grinding through early mornings, late nights, and endless deadlines as a mechanic, I picture myself on a porch swing, a steaming mug of coffee in hand, nodding hello to neighbors as they stroll by with their dogs or kids. No more oil-stained coveralls. No more busted knuckles, just the soft rustle of leaves and the hum of a life finally slowed down. When I found Maple Lane, a sleepy little street tucked into the heart of Willow Grove, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. The neighborhood was a postcard. Quaint houses with neatly trimmed lawns, towering oaks casting dappled shadows, and a cul-de-sac that promised the kind of stillness I'd been chasing. I bought a modest two-story with a wraparound porch, sank my SAVY NGS into fixing it up, and figured I'd spend my golden years tinkering with my old Chevy in the garage. That was the plan until the HOA sank its claws into me. My name's Tom Carver, and I'm not the kind of guy who looks for trouble. I keep my head down, pay my bills, and mind my own business. So when I decided to pour a concrete driveway from my garage to the street, I didn't think twice about it. My knees aren't what they used to be, and hauling groceries across a gravel path was starting to feel like a punishment. The driveway wasn't anything fancy, just a smooth, gray slab wide enough for my truck and the little Airstream trailer I'd been restoring. It took 3 weeks of backbreaking work, a couple of buddies from the old shop pitching in, and about due law $4,000 out of my retirement fund. I got the permits from the city, checked the property lines with a surveyor friend, and made sure every I was dotted. I figured I was golden. 3 days after the concrete cured, I found out how wrong I was. It started with a letter. Not a friendly note slipped under the door, but a thick, official-looking envelope stamped with the Willow Grove Homeowners Association logo, a pretentious little crest with a tree and a gavel. Inside was a single page, typed in cold, bureaucratic language, informing me that my driveway was in violation of community standards and demanding its immediate removal. There was no explanation, no specific rule cited, just a deadline of 10 days and a threat of fines if I didn't comply. I read it twice, figuring it had to be a mix-up. I'd seen driveways all over the neighborhood, some cracked and mossy, sure, but none torn out by HOA decree. I tossed the letter on the kitchen counter and told myself I'd sort it out later. Later came faster than I expected. The next morning, I walked out to grab the paper and found a neon yellow sticker plastered across my garage door. Notice of non-compliance subject to legal action. My stomach dropped. I peeled it off, the adhesive Leah VY-ing a sticky smear, and reread the letter. This wasn't a mistake, it was a declaration of war. I decided to take it straight to the source. The HOA office, a smug little brick building at the neighborhood's entrance, complete with manicured shrubs and a sign that read Willow Grove HOA. Presser VY-ing our community. That's where I met Evelyn Pierce, the HOA president. She was a wiry woman in her late 50s, with sharp cheekbones and a perm so tight it looked like it hurt. She greeted me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, her voice clipped and dripping with condescension. "Mr. Carver," she said, glancing at my permits like they were junk mail. "These city papers mean nothing here. The HOA has its own standards, and your driveway doesn't meet them. It's too utilitarian. We have an aesthetic to maintain." I blinked, trying to keep my cool. Aesthetic? It's a driveway, not a sculpture. I've got the permits, right? Her breathing's legal. What rule did I break? She waved a hand, dismissing me. "You didn't submit a design proposal to the board. All exterior modifications require approval. It's in the bylaws, page 17, section 4.2. You should have known." "I've lived here 3 months, I said, my voice rising despite myself. "No one gave me a rule book. I checked with the city." "The city doesn't run Willow Grove," she snapped. "We do. Remove the driveway, or the fine start at due law, $200 a day. Your choice." She turned back to her desk, effectively ending the conversation. I stood there, heat creeping up my neck, then walked out before I said something I'd regret. That night, I dug through the closing paperwork from when I bought the house. Sure enough, there was a mention of the HOA, but it was buried in fine print I'd skimmed over. I cursed myself for not reading closer, but I wasn't about to let Evelyn bulldoze me. I called the city again the next day, and they confirmed my permits were airtight. The driveway was on my property, connected to a public road. The HOA could shove their aesthetics where the sun didn't shine her, so I thought. The fine started a week later. Every morning, a new notice in my mailbox. Do law 200, then do law 400, then do law 600, piling up like a bad joke. Then came a cease and desist letter, claiming I was disrupting community harmony. I started losing sleep, the stress gnawing at me. I catch myself staring out the window, waiting for the next blow. My neighbors didn't help much. Most avoided eye contact, though one guy, a grizzled vet named Hank, muttered over the fence, "Evelyn's got a vendetta streak. Watch your back." When I asked why she'd single me out, he just shrugged. New blood, maybe, or she didn't like your truck. It felt personal, but I couldn't figure out why. I'd never even met her before that day in the office. Then I remembered something the real estate agent, a chatty woman named Linda, had said during the house tour. The street out front's a little unique, privately maintained, I think. Doesn't come up much. At the time, I nodded and moved on, more focused on the garage than some obscure road detail. Now, with Evelyn's army of notices piling up, I wondered if there was more to it. I took a day off from tinkering with the Chevy and drove to the county records office, a squat building downtown that smelled like dust and old coffee. The clerk, a bored kid with a nose ring, handed me a stack of files tied to my address. I spent hours flipping through faded maps and yellowed deeds, my fingers smudged with ink. Then I found it, a document from 1968, crisp despite its age, showing that Maple Lane, the whole damn street, from my driveway to the intersection 400 feet away, wasn't part of the HOA's jurisdiction. It had been deeded as private property decades ago, sold with the house I now owned. I owned the road. Every pothole, every crack, every inch of asphalt, it was mine. I sat back in the creaky chair, the paper trembling in my hands. A laugh bubbled up, sharp and disbelieving VYing. Evelyn had been hounding me over a driveway on a road she didn't even control. I photocopied the deed, highlighted the boundaries, and drove home with a grin I couldn't shake. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had the upper hand. I didn't waste time. I called a real estate lawyer named Mike Russo, a guy I'd met years back when he needed his transmission fixed. He re-VYEU'd the documents, called the county to double-check, and laughed so hard I thought he'd choke. "Tom, this is a slam dunk," he said. "The HOA's got no claim here. No easement, no rights, nothing. Those fines? They're toothless. You could sue them for harassment if you wanted." "Sue them," I said. "I just want them off my back." "Then let's hit him with the facts," he replied. "Draft a letter, send it certified. Make it clear you know the score." So I did. I typed up a polite but firm cease and desist, attached copies of the deed, and mailed it to Evelyn and every HOA board member listed on their website. I even threw in a line about being open to a road maintenance discussion if they wanted to play nice. 2 days later, Evelyn showed up at my door, her face a mask of barely contained rage. "You think you can waltz in here and rewrite the rules?" she hissed, clutching a crumpled copy of my letter. "This is nonsense. That road's been ours for years." "It's not," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "Check the deed. Check the county. It's mine, Evelyn. You got no say." Her eyes flashed, and for a second, I thought she might swing at me. Instead, she spun on her heel and stormed off, VYing a trail of muttered curses. I figured that'd be the end of it. I was wrong. The next week, a new notice arrived, this time claiming I was obstructing a community thoroughfare and that the HOA would take necessary action to remove the obstruction. I stared at the paper, incredulous. They were doubling down. That's when I decided to stop playing defense. If I owned the road, I'd act like it. I ordered a custom sign online. Private property, Maple Lane, no HOA access without permission. It arrived in glossy black and white, and I planted it right where my driveway met the street, staking it deep into the ground. Then I installed 2 security cameras, one at the sign, one by the garage powered, with motion alerts straight to my phone. The neighborhood buzzed. A few folks stopped by to ask questions, their voices hushed like they were afraid Evelyn might hear. I showed them the deed, explain the situation, and watch their eyes widen. She's been bluffing us for years. One woman, a quiet librarian named Sarah, whispered. My husband paid Dula $500 last year for a shed she said was too tall. Then why is everyone so scared of her? I asked. Sarah hesitated. She's got dirt on people, old fines, petty grudges, and her husband's some big-shot lawyer downtown. They think she's untouchable. Not anymore, I said. The cameras caught their first action a week later. At 2 a.m., my phone pinged with an alert. I opened the app and saw 3 figures in hoodies spray painting my sign red streaks, spelling out HOA rules. I called the cops, sent them a footage, and by morning, they'd tracked the paint cans to a hardware store receipt linked to Evelyn's nephew, a punk kid who lived 2 streets over. She denied everything, but the damage was done. The neighborhood started talking. I upped the ante. If Evelyn wanted a fight, I'd give her one she couldn't ignore. I called a contractor buddy, got the permits, and installed a gated, sturdy metal thing with a keypad right at the edge of my private stretch of Maple Lane. It wasn't cheap, but it was legal, and it sent a message. The signs went up too. Private road access by permission only. I didn't lock it, yet just left it open, a quiet threat. The reaction was instant. Neighbors gawked. Some cheered, and Evelyn lost her mind. She called an emergency HOA meeting, and I decided it was time to show up. I'd never been to one before, never had a reason, but this time, I walked in with a folder thick with Evy Denke. The deed, the permits, the camera stills, even a letter from Mike confirming my rights. The clubhouse was packed, the air thick with tension. Evelyn stood at the front, her voice shrill as she ranted about rogue homeowners undermining community values. When she finished, I raised my hand. Tom Carver, 112, Maple Lane, I said, standing. I've got something to share. She tried to cut me off, but the room turned on her, people shouting, "Let him speak." I passed out copies of the deed, walked them through the history, and dropped the bombshell. This road doesn't just stop at my driveway. It runs 400 feet, almost to the entrance. I own it, not the HOA. Me. The room erupted. Evelyn sputtered. That's preposterous. But folks were already flipping through the papers, murmuring. A guy in the back, Hank, the vet, called out, "So you're saying she's got no power over it?" "None," I said. "And if she keeps pushing, I can close it. Legally. Gate's already up." That did it. The meeting spiraled, people asking questions, demanding answers. Evelyn tried to regain control, but she was drowning. I left that night with a dozen neighbors' phone numbers and a plan forming. This wasn't just about my driveway anymore. The next morning, I found a note in my mailbox, no envelope, just a scrap of paper. "You'll regret this, roadman." I laughed it off, but 2 nights later, the gate was hit. Someone had taken a crowbar to the keypad, ripped out the wires, and scrawled, "HOA forever," in marker. The cameras caught it, all 2 figures, one in a jacket I'd seen Evelyn wear at the office. I filed another police report, and this time they hauled her in for questioning. She claimed innocence, but the cracks were showing. I didn't stop. I and Ted, the neighbors, over Sarah, Hank, a dozen others for a backyard barbecue. Over burgers and beer, I laid it all out. The road, the HOA's bluffs, the chance to fight back. They shared their own stories, fines for flower pots, threats over fence heights, a kid fined for a lemonade stand. The anger simmered, then boiled over. Sarah, timid as she was, said first, "Why do we even have an HOA?" I've been wondering the same thing. I called Mike again, and he walked me through it. Dissolving an HOA took a majority vote, 51 fan tram of homeowners and a formal meeting. It wasn't easy, but it was doable. That night, we started a petition. By week's end, we had 28 signature Reswo thirds of Willow Grove. Evelyn fought back. She sent a mass email calling our group anarchists and threatening lawsuits. It backfired. People were done with her scare tactics. 2 board members quit, one slipping me an apology note. Didn't know she was this bad. The vote came 3 weeks later. It wasn't close, 82 fan tram to dissolve. Evelyn stood at the podium, shaking as the gavel fell. The HOA was dead. I thought that'd be the end, but Evelyn had one last card. A month later, I got served papers she was suing me for emotional distress, claiming my campaign had ruined her life. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the summons. Mike took one look and said, "This is a tantrum, not a case." We filed to dismiss, piling on EVY Densivary letter, every VY Deo, every neighbor's statement. The judge tossed it in a week. Evelyn moved out that spring. Her house sold quietly to a young couple who painted the shutters blue. Willow Grove changed lawns got wilder, kids played louder, and I kept the gate open most days, a symbol more than a barrier. They started calling me Road King, and the kids dubbed Maple Lane Carver's Causeway. I'd sip my coffee on the porch, wave to the neighbors, and smile. Peace wasn't just a dream, Anna Marie, it was mine, earned the hard way. If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this VY Deo with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next VY Deo.